Next up we have Juniper Green Primary Parent Council. We have Kirsty Cumming, who's the chair, accompanied by Mark Hargreave. Is it Mary?
There's two of them.
Apologies, it's Mary, not Mark.
Who is it? We've got the right one.
Yeah. Kirsty is the chair and
Mariam.
Names pops up again.
Okay. Okay, if you want to just introduce yourselves.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Hargreaves. I'm the co-chair of Juniper Green Primary School Parent Council, along with Kirsty Cumming, who's with me. And we're also joined by Naomi Barton, who I know that you all know, but Naomi also has children at Juniper Green Primary School and is part of our Parent Council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today. As has already been explained, our deputations represents the views of all the parent and community councils that have been working together. And this deputation will focus entirely on the educational impact of the proposals. But we will, of course, also be happy to take questions specific to Juniper Green Primary School. Okay. So as you may be aware, over the past few months, we've repeatedly signalled that our strong preference is to retain all of our 4 schools on their current sites. So we're very pleased to see this included within the outcomes report as alternative option 1, and this is our preferred option. Parents have been clear from the outset of this process that we need to see clear evidence of the educational benefits of any change to justify closing any of our community schools. Today, we would like to give you our views on 3 of the claims about educational benefits made in the outcomes report. Firstly, we are not convinced that a new merged school will help to close the attainment gap. Secondly, we believe that to state a new purpose-built school would have inherent educational benefits is misleading. And thirdly, we believe that to claim a larger school will offer more opportunities to attain and achieve is questionable. So starting with the issue of the attainment gap, maximising opportunities for every child to achieve his or her very best is an aim that everyone in this room will certainly be in support of. However, we are not convinced that closing our community schools and building a new, larger school with a more socially diverse catchment area will necessarily help us to do that. The research referred to in this report claims that increasing the social mix of students within schools could increase the relative performance of disadvantaged students without any apparent negative impact on overall performance. We don't find this to be a convincing or conclusive statement. As well as the lack of compelling research, there is also very limited practical experience to draw on. As the report states, a new merged school in the southwest of the city would be the most socially diverse in Edinburgh by some margin. And the truth is we don't know what the impact would be. It feels experimental, which as parents we are deeply uncomfortable with. Much of the research we have viewed actually suggests that in more disadvantaged areas, prioritising links with parents and with communities is one of the most effective strategies to improve attainment. We know that parental engagement in some areas can be a real challenge. We have already seen that in part through this process. And we believe uprooting schools from their established communities would actually introduce a new barrier to existing parental engagement, which has taken a huge amount of time and effort to build up. We feel that would feel like a backward step. Whilst we fully support the aim of closing the attainment gap, all the research we've viewed points to there being no easy way to achieve that. We feel the limited evidence presented here is simply not enough justification to close any of our schools. And in fact, such a move could reduce overall attainment. Moving on to point 2, how much does a brand new school building impact attainment? This report repeatedly suggests that a new purpose-built school building will have inherent educational benefit. It claims that a new school will help maximise opportunities to attain and achieve for all young people. However, there is no specific evidence presented to support this claim, and we are not aware of any. We can accept that new purpose-built facilities will have a positive impact on staff and pupil motivation and morale, but surely that argument applies equally well to the refurbishment or rebuilding of our existing schools on their existing sites to enable much-needed upgrading of technical spaces for ICT, food technology and STEM subjects, for example. Parents would, of course, welcome significant investments in our schools and the introduction of state-of-the-art facilities, but not at the expense of closing our existing schools and taking our children out of a community school where they feel a sense of belonging and identity. The final point we would like to address today is the bigger is better claim in the report in respect of school size. This report recognises what we have believed all along, that there is no link between school size and attainment. The report does still claim that the curriculum on offer in a larger school can be more extensive and flexible, and that larger schools may be able to offer wider achievement opportunities. We would question this. We know Curry Community High School is already offering a very similar curriculum choice to Portobello High School, a much bigger high school. So again, this claim is not supported by the facts. Smaller schools and smaller classes typically lead to more effective teacher and student relationships with greater opportunities for targeted support, such as student counselling or mentoring. The teachers in smaller schools get to know their students as individuals in a way that just couldn't happen in a much larger school. We currently have 4 great local community schools. We believe strongly that there needs to be clear, unequivocal evidence that closing one or more of them will create educational benefits for all the affected children. We've still not seen that evidence. We very much welcome the plans to feed the views of our head teachers and teachers into the process before you reach your final decision, as we feel this is an essential voice to be heard in terms of educational impact. But at this stage, as parents and community groups, we remain far from convinced as to the credibility of some of the claims made in the report. The wealth of global evidence we've reviewed points overwhelmingly to the factors leading to successful schools being driven by great leadership, fantastic teachers, high levels of parental engagement, the overall ethos and culture of a school, and great links with the communities. Yet these are exactly the things that you would be damaging if you closed any of our community schools. These are the areas where we should be focusing our resources, retaining the very best leaders and teachers in all of our schools and leaving the schools where they are in the heart of the communities that they already serve so well. The only option that achieves that is the alternative option 1, and this is the option we strongly support. We believe that any other option could potentially have severe repercussions for the educational impact of our children and for generations to come. Kirsty will now make a few summarising statements.
Thanks. So in summary, we are fortunate to have 4 fantastic local community high schools, each with their own distinct identity that play an important role in their community. And understandably, we want our children to continue to benefit from them. To remove one or more of these schools should require solid evidence that the resultant new merged school will provide educational benefits to all of the pupils. But we're not convinced that this guarantee can be made. And this is why we can only support option 1 to keep all 4 schools. We feel it's so important to keep children in the local schools, where links with parents and communities are strong, and that this also aligns with the current educational research on improving attainment. Also, evidence shows that the size is not a factor in the school's success, and small and medium schools can lead to more effective teacher-pupil relationships. Our great teachers make far more impact on attainment than any new structure will. The pupils and parents of Curry High School, Woodland School, Balerno and Wester Hales Centre all want to keep their great local community schools. Please show that these views matter. These views, together with unconvincing evidence on educational benefits, is the logical argument that we make in asking you to support keeping all 4 schools. I hope in the last 10 minutes we've expressed clearly our reservations and explained why we strongly support alternative option 1 to keep all 4 schools. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Questions, Gavin?
Thanks very much, Convener. I mean, there's a lot of really important stuff to be discussed. This is the heart of what we're here to discuss. And you referred to the OECD study. That's not necessarily a light piece of bedroom reading, so I want to ask a couple of things about it. I mean, it's right to say that having done some modelling, it poses some questions around the potential uplift benefit from more diverse schools, but it does have a couple of caveats that you mentioned. One was that these uplift benefits are more obvious in more segregated systems like in continental Europe, and we described UK as a kind of halfway house between continental Europe and Nordic models. And secondly, right at the end, it poses a research agenda that all research papers do, along much better understanding qualitatively of how the factors that it exposes, which is around social mix, also play with other things that you mentioned, like teaching, community links, and all the other important things. But given that I think it poses a really important question for us to look at, I want to come back to the point I tried to make at the start, which is, could some of the benefits that are posed, and which you're questioning, understandably, but not saying they're utterly irrelevant, could some of those be achieved by greater partnership and cooperation between the schools that we're here to talk about today?
I'm happy to say that. Yes, I think we would give a resounding yes to that question in terms of working in partnership. This whole process has shown how closely our communities already work together, but also identified areas for opportunity in terms of how our schools could continue to work more closely together in the future. So based on those clear points around great leadership and great teachers and improving those links with the communities, I think you could absolutely draw that forward to them working more collaboratively across the 4 schools.
I was going to ask a similar type of question, and clearly that you're not convinced of the research that's here. And you mentioned other research. Has that research been handed in to us to look at, to compare?
We haven't provided that as yet, but we'd be happy to do so. Yeah. I would say that I'm not an educational expert and don't profess to speak as one, but I've looked at some other studies and would be happy to point to the ones that I have looked at.
It would be useful to hand in everything, because I know we've had at least 3 studies, I think, handed in, which suggest opposite, that smaller schools actually produce better results. And as Gavin said, this is pretty well a crux of the matter here in terms of if we're going to close the gap, exactly how we're going to do it, because that's one of the principles we're trying to address. So it looks like at the end of this meeting, we need to identify what other information we need, and clearly if you've got information that is related to that, then we need to see it. Callum first. And then...
Can I add to the evidence? So the information that you've given in Appendix 6, that just compares, so that's like S4, the bit about S4 and attainments there. So just in terms of, as an educationalist, somebody that was looking at schools, it's all about tracking, and it's not just one snapshot. So it would be great to see from your insight that more of tracking with more information over years.
Right. So what would you exactly like to see, so we can pin it down? Because we're going to ask for more information. Yeah. But it'd be useful for you. So
we're aware of virtual comparison. So having a more, so rather than taking a school, another Edinburgh Council school, because obviously each school is individual with their different ethos, their teacher, their size, etc., etc. If we're comparing our school with that, we're not going to get a direct match. So that virtual comparison is one area to have more of a match. Does that make sense?
Not sure. To be honest, Alec, are you going to help me?
I hope so. The Scottish Government have built a tool called Insight, which allows schools to have a look at their performance against a virtual comparator school. So that's what you're talking about, I think.
So,
Yes.
Andy, I don't think you're raising it.
That contribution was half correct. There is a benchmarking toolkit. There is an Insight that allows us to compare how good a school is by a virtual comparator. It's not a virtual comparator. It used to be a comparator school, so it looked at the profile of similar schools and you could link against that. That's not the case now. We look at a virtual comparator data set of 5,000 others.
So it's not a real school, it's a virtual school. So we will do that, but it would be useful to, if you think about exactly what you want us to do, to write it down and send it in.
Yeah, certainly, we'll do that.
Yeah, because it's difficult to think this thing through. Sorry, Callum was next, then Mary, then Alison's want to come in.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for your deputation. I agree with much of the sentiment. I think one thing that seems to have come out from this whole process, which may be a positive from what I know has been quite a stressful experience, is that the schools, at all 4 schools and all the primary schools as well, seem to be working very well together, and those relationships undoubtedly were there before. I know my aunt actually taught it to 2 of the high schools, and she said, actually, we're talking about these separate schools, but all these schools have very good relationships, but they have deepened. And perhaps, as we move forward, and it does seem that there's a clear preference from much of the community for alternative option 1, perhaps looking at that option, there is a piece of work to be done about how those partnerships can be deepened, how they can be formalised, how we can work better within communities like Pentland Hills, perhaps as a model for the rest of Edinburgh. Curry's clearly an excellent school, as is Balerno, and perhaps looking at what makes it such a good school and how that can be applied, whether that's mentorship, whether that's greater partnership with the pupils or teachers. I think there's a really strong piece of work there. I really hope that that's one of the positives that has come out of this process, which I know has been quite stressful and demanding for everyone in this room.
It's more of a comment than a question, but you can...
We agree.
Thought that might happen. Susan's next, and then... Sorry, Mary first. Sorry, Mary.
Thank you very much for your detailed presentation. I actually want to go back a little step to after Tiggy's presentation. There's a lot of talk about active travel and safe routes to school. And there was also an even earlier comment that was mentioned that things are quite different than they appear on Google Maps. And I wanted to ask you about alternative option 2, where on Google Maps that looks like it would benefit Juniper Green. There's a new school, it's much closer to your geographical location. And I was wondering if you could give a bit more detail about why that you don't feel that's a suitable option.
So that particular site, first of all, the traffic round there is tremendously bad, and it's like a little field, and all round it you've got these major intersections. So there's the bypass, and Crawford was very kind and did a walk with us, and when we got to that bit, I was saying to Crawford, "This is awful here," and I don't know if he could hear me very well because of the noise pollution. And it's just a really horrendous sight. To think of my little girl walking to there, she would have to go around the long way, and even then it wouldn't be great. But the roads are just, it's the access to the bypass. I mean, what child would be on a safe route to that? And I don't know how you would get about round that, but having so many children in a space which is a travel route just seems wrong.
Okay, Susan.
Thank you, Convener. You mentioned in your talk, Mary, about the parental engagement and how that would be affected by the different locations. Can you maybe elaborate on that and how important parental engagement is in terms of attainment?
We believe parental engagement is one of the most important things, and we also recognise that it's not always easy to achieve. And we have a number of different schools across the area that we all live in and are talking about, and the challenges with parental engagement have been different in those different areas. And Amanda Campbell will talk shortly about Wester Hales Education Centre and potentially some of the challenges, but also the great work that Amanda and her team have done to make really excellent strides forward in parental engagement where it's not naturally an easy thing to achieve. And what we don't want to see is all of that good work being undone.
Alison.
Mary really asked my question, but it's just to tidy up on the educational benefits. Before any statutory consultation, you've already seen some of the stuff filtering through that's based in research, but it will be a hugely detailed, educational benefits statement, HMI, the lot, eyes all go over that, the experts. That's just to kind of reassure you on that point.
Any other questions? What I will say to you, you did mention the teaching profession there, and what it is our intention is to go out and consult after after the session today. We felt it's better to have some options that the teachers can reflect on rather than ask them a sort of general question. But that will happen after this. Okay, thank you very much. Leslie.